Now, the crowds have stretched over a mile across the Venezuelan capital of Caracas as the country says its final farewell to the man known as Comandante Presidente. More than 30 world leaders, including Cuba's Raul Castro, Iran's Mahmoud Ahmadinajad, are in the city for the state funeral of Hugo Chavez, but it is in many ways a ceremony for the people. Our Washington correspondent Matt Fry is in Caracas. He joins us now. Matt.
Well, John, they take their mourning very seriously in this country. In fact, the government has banned the public consumption of alcohol for a week. Most of the shops are still closed. There's still an official period of mourning for another week. And if you go to the military academy, where Hugo Chavez is still lying in state, there are literally hundreds of thousands of people thronging those streets to try and get a glimpse of the man. Now, the funeral itself ended just a few minutes ago, and Vice President Nicolás Maduro, who's been anointed to take over from Chavez, gave a homily in which he combined adulation for his former boss with defiance of all those who don't share his opinion. The queue to see Chavez is still so long, the authorities decided to hold the funeral in the military academy where he's been lying in state. For the country and the government, this was an opportunity to do many things, not just pay respects to the man who dominated Venezuela for the last 14 years. First up, the symbolic passing of the torch, or in this case, the sword of power. The sword is in fact a replica of the one that had once belonged to Simón Bolívar, the liberator of Latin America from colonial rule and Chávez's main inspiration. Today it was held aloft by the man who inherits Chávez's mantle, Vice President Nicolás Maduro, former bus driver and union boss, who'll be sworn in as interim president later today and hopes to get re-anointed in fresh elections. The sword was his personal gift to his dead patron. Then this was an opportunity for Venezuela to show off its friends to the world. After the Latin American leaders, pride of place in their very own guard of honor, President Ahmadinajad of Iran and President Lukashenko of Belarus, the dictator who has a habit of taking his 9-year-old son Nikolai out of school to attend affairs of state. Raul Castro, brother of Fidel, also had a front row seat. To Washington, this may look like a class reunion of the axis of evil, but to the guests here, this is the club of countries that pride themselves on defying America. Many of those in the audience lack most of the things that Chavez possessed: charisma, a popular mandate, plenty of oil, and a good friend from Hollywood. The actor Sean Penn was also in attendance. Hugo Chavez reveled being a divisive figure, and he'll continue to divide opinions at home and abroad, even from the grave. Now, the US, not a great friend of Venezuela, also sent a delegation, albeit a very minor one, and the Reverend Jesse Jackson was here in his own personal capacity, and he was allowed to speak. And he told the audience that champions like Chavez do not belong in the ground. I dare say that the tens of thousands of people outside who we met this morning would heartily agree with him. This feels less like a funeral and more like a celebration of immortality. And every time the camera passes, the exhausted faithful who've been waiting on their feet for up to 24 hours play their part. All this despite the soaring heat. Chavez may be dead, but they all behave as if he's still alive. Highlights of a life cut short at only 58 years are played on giant screens on a loop. Given perhaps his posthumous appeal, the government has taken the decision not to bury him, but to embalm Chavez and keep him lying in state forever. Elsewhere, embalming may be so yesterday, but not here. So what she said, it's very important for them to have Chavez embalmed so that there's a physical presence there to complement the idea of El Comandante. Immortality is the rarest of compliments, and for this crowd, Chavez has joined the top three. ¿Quiénes son? Cristo? Bolívar? What they're saying is that the three most important people in their lives, all dead, are Jesus Christ, Simón Bolívar, and now Hugo Chavez. Immortality also spawns its own cottage industry of icons. This one inflatable. And here too, Venezuela has experienced a boom. This morning, these caps started to appear on the streets.
This is the pantheon of great leaders on one hat. Che Guevara, Hugo Chavez, Simón Bolívar, and of course here, Fidel Castro. Muy bien.
In fact, Cuba has been mourning almost as much as Venezuela. Fidel Castro was mentor and best friend to Hugo Chavez, and Chavez repaid the favor with cheap oil and an economic lifeline. For now, this city has ground to a halt as the country goes through various stages of grief. But Chavez was such a towering personality on this continent that even in death, the old rule has been rewritten. What happens in Caracas doesn't stay in Caracas. Now, Vice President Maduro will be sworn in as interim president later today. At some stage in the next few days, they should announce fresh elections, perhaps by the middle of April. And all this really goes to show that the election campaign as such has already started. The campaign to keep the Chavez revolution on track for the people who support him. Back to you.
Matt Fry from the windy city of Caracas.